I want to talk about the illusion of control. And you can apply this to any area of your life, obviously, because I work a lot with around relationship. It's a very good example of where we try to control, whether we try to control another or the dating process or where the relationship is going or what is possible within the relationship or not possible within the relationship. Control gives us the illusion of safety, but I want to go into why it's an illusion and what we're actually really needing rather than trying to control others and our environment. So let's dive in. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. I want to preface this by saying that I think we probably all have at one point or another, to varying degrees, experienced the want to control. You know, we live, life is such a thing in and of itself that really requires trust, trust and an element of surrender because we don't really know. And so we're constantly stepping into an unknown. I would just say that we live in a culture, society now that is so kind of far removed from our true inner nature, as I've shared in the past, that I think what that does is it creates more fear. We also live in a society that likes to induce more fear and kind of publicize fear a lot more than say beauty or harmony, or I'm talking just like on the main stage, but you of course can find it. But all of these things, what they do, it's like we've been removed from our true nature. We've been removed from our intuition, from our inner knowing, our inner wisdom. We've been disconnected from one another. So we don't have necessarily the sense of safety that maybe the tribe once gave us. And life, we've kind of been taught that like nature is very dangerous and it's very scary and death is very scary. And, nobody wants to die. But yet I think our relationship to death and to life, because of our relationship to death, is kind of has gone a little bit awry. It's gone a little bit sideways. Now, this all sounds like a tangent, but the reason why I'm sharing it is because all of that breeds a ground to want to control, because control comes from a place of fear. And if we were really in tune, I'm sure we would still have instinctual fear, but I think we're on overdrive as far as instinctual fear. I think instinctual fear has almost moved into more habitual fear. And so we're really in overdrive. It makes me think of, I forget his name now, Stephen Levine, that talks about how he was writing in a book that, animals, when they go through something traumatic, they shake it off. Humans, we don't. We store things because we don't have the tools. We don't have the environment to process things. We're a culture, society that's very good at masking symptoms and only addressing symptoms and not going into the deeper, the deeper aspects of us. And so then we also aren't often transforming or transmuting things. And so we're storing them and we're pushing them down and we're repressing them and suppressing them. So what the hell is the point of what I'm saying? You do all of that and you move us into a greater place of fear, a less of the ability to trust, and so more so the want to control. When that comes to a relationship, just like life, really requires an element of trust and surrender because we don't know. And you know what? It's okay. It's okay not to know all the time. But for some people, especially dependent on your attachment style, it's terribly terrifying to not know. It creates a lot of anxiety. It creates a lot of worry, fear. It can be really ungrounding. So the more that it creates the unknown, the more that it creates anxiety or fear or worry, the more the inclination to go into survival mode and to want to control. So the idea that people have sometimes, and I'm going to use the context of relationship, but like I said at the beginning, you can really apply this in any situation. But people think if I can control that person, if I can control this process, like, okay, I'm dating this person, but and this is a lot of this is unconditional. Sorry, not unconditional, unconscious, and there's no judgment when I'm talking about this. It's actually just to really understand the potential patterning, so that we can evolve it and we can ultimately give ourselves what we need. This is why I'm here, to try to bring some explanation to these things and shed light and bring awareness in a really loving, kind way, so that we can transmute it. So if someone says, okay, I want to control, again, unconsciously, the process of dating. I want to get to the point where I know, are we committed? I want to get to the point, I think I shared this last week, that once we're committed, once we're living together, once we're engaged, once we're married, once we have the house, once we have the kids, it's all future projection of when I get there, then I will feel safe. And that is a total illusion. And not only is that an illusion because it's projecting into a future, it's creating a kind of expectation. It also creates a tremendous amount of pressure, because the moment we're innately, I think, free-spirited. So the moment we try to control something, we're choking it a little bit. And not only that, so that person might feel claustrophobic, but the person that is anxious, wanting to control, gets really exhausted, because it's very exhausting to try to control something that is uncontrollable. Now, as I've shared in the past, the only thing we have control of is ourselves and our ability to respond versus react, and the choices that we make. But we can't control another person, and we can't really control life in the context of what I'm saying, that it's like, I'm going to predict exactly what's going to happen, and I'm going to make sure it happens exactly like that. Like, that's pretty much impossible. And when we're coming from that perspective and that energy, more so, that we're kind of putting a noose on life, normally we put ourselves into a state of tension versus relaxation, and we're out of flow. And then we almost create more problems, or at the very least, it just becomes a really stressful experience. Life becomes, very anxiety ridden, and there's kind of nothing that satiates it, especially from the outside. Because the thing is, the moment, much like not good enough, the moment you get to the first goalpost, you're going to have to get to the second one, and then the third one, and then the fourth one, because you'll never ever reach that external, and now I feel safe. Now I can let my anxiety relax. So there's a total illusion in believing that if I control my environment, if I control my partner, if I control my children, if I control my friends, if I control all of this, that it's like life is going to be okay and all of a sudden safe. I mean, if anything, look at, I like to look at the macro and the micro. Look at the macro, look at the world stage. What happens when, there is a big force of control? It creates oppression. It creates all sorts of shadowy stuff that's not healthy, because it's not in our innate nature to do that. So to bring it back in, the illusion is that is going to give you safety, but safety is the key word here. The key word and the invitation is, in what ways do you not feel safe within yourself? In what ways do you feel out of control within yourself? Is the tail wagging the dog? And this requires so much compassion, because, as you've heard me say many times, there's always a reason for our behavior. And somebody that is anxiously attached, although avoidance can also have this, avoidance also want to control their environment, just in a very different way, in opposing ways. And they kind of attract each other quite often, because the avoidant wants to be needed, and the anxious is used to not getting what they're used to being anxious. So they're used to being ignored or neglected, or, craving, yearning, wanting. And so both need to kind of break the pattern to kind of really come into a place of security and being in a healthy dynamic, interpersonal dynamic. But the behavior always has a reason, right? It always comes from someplace. So maybe there just wasn't the kind of healthy attachment as a child that you needed from your parents, or, could also be from certain experiences at school, peers, teachers. There's many factors, but it does tend to go back to our childhood, to, how secure or how healthy were our connections. Sometimes avoidance, it could be because, maybe they were neglected and that's how they kind of dealt with it. That tends to be more anxious attachment. It could also be that they were smothered. And so it was like, ooh, this is too much. This is like too much in my space. I can't be my own autonomous person. And so the pushing away is the avoidance, like I need space. Often the anxious actually didn't have enough attention. So, it can go in many different ways, but so there's always a reason for our behavior. But really at the core of it, I would say, how safe do we feel within ourselves? And reflecting upon what I, kind of maybe continuing the conversation from last week, do we feel safe when we're vulnerable? We will often say, well, I can only be vulnerable if the person that I'm with makes me feel safe enough to do so. And that's an absolutely valid point. And I would say, yeah, that's true. And we could also be with someone that is completely holding our vulnerability and our humanity in a very safe container, a very loving, compassionate, non-judgmental container. And if we still haven't really discovered how to feel comfortable and safe within our own vulnerability, within our own humanity, there's always going to be something where we're like, I'm not going to really fully trust it. I'm not going to really fully relax and soften into it and go into that, the state of relaxation that brings us into flow. So really the invitation when we are trying to go to the external to control someone else or to control a process or to control our environment or our life at large, it's really an invitation to turn back towards ourselves. And, it's kind of always the invitation, right? It has to start within. It's not, again, I'm going to repeat, it's not to say that we can't be in a beautiful, loving relationship and they can, help us see our worth and our lovability and to offer us safety, but we still really have to embody that from the inside out just so that we can relax. Just so we don't have to always be in a state of whatever, fear, anxiety, worry, anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, like coming into a place of, as far as attachment goes, security, in my opinion, really comes down to how comfortable are we within ourselves? Do we feel secure within ourselves? Because you can be with a secure person and you can still be totally anxious. And that's just really indicative. It just shows that the fear, the lack of control, the anxiety is coming from the inside. Sometimes you might be in a situation, that's why they often say, don't put an anxious person with an avoidant person because they'll trigger the shit out of each other. Especially for the anxious person, it's going to be, well, for both actually, for both. It's just, the anxious might show it more. But, don't do that because it's just going to perpetuate the anxiety. However, if you are in that situation and that relationship, it's also an amazing opportunity to really start to look at the deeper aspects of your fear. Basically, it comes down to fear. But an anxious person can be with a secure person and still feel tremendous amounts of anxiety. And in those situations, if the external isn't constantly triggering, then it's just showing, okay, what's happening inside of me that I still don't feel safe. I don't feel safe within myself. I don't feel safe really trusting relationship, connection, intimacy. That was a couple episodes ago. Vulnerability, all of these things. So really the invitation is always to turn back towards yourself with curiosity and compassion and kindness and a lot of patience. and to really ask yourself, okay, when I'm going to control someone or something else, how am I scared right now? What am I afraid of? What do I need? How do I give myself that need? How can I support myself so that in this moment where I don't feel okay, what can make it feel okay? And not going immediately to the outside. Well, I'll feel okay when they commit to this. I'll feel okay if they spend every waking moment with me. I'm exaggerating, but just to make a point. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like if it's conditional on something else happening, you're already out of control. Because you can't, even if we look at nonviolent communication, there's sharing the observation, how you feel about it, what's the need under the feeling. The fourth is a request. It's never a demand. Because when you're really in an autonomous, I don't want to use that word actually, because that can have some connotations, but let's just say you're in a relationship where you want to create a healthy balance of power and harmony and whatever you want to call it. Let's just call it harmony. You can't ever demand or expect or manipulate or tell someone this is what they need to do. These are my needs and you have to fulfill them. That's never going to be good. That's never going to go down well. So it's always a request. In nonviolent communication, it's always a request. But I don't even need to call it nonviolent communication. I would say conscious communication. I would just say being in awareness with someone and knowing that we are each our own sovereign beings. And this is really leading us towards being in an interdependent relationship rather than a codependent relationship. And we've really... majority, I had a couple once ask me this. They're like, how do you think most relationships are codependent? And I'm like, yeah. And ironically, just on a side note, the reason a lot of the times is because we have this bullshit teaching that like, no, don't give too much to your baby. If they cry, don't give them what they need or want. Put them in their crib, let them cry. That is going to create a far more insecure adult, a far more codependent adult. The more a child feels healthily attached, that they know that they're not going to be rejected, neglected, or abandoned. I'm not talking about mollycoddling. That's a totally different thing too. But when a child knows that their parent is present with them, they give them their fundamental needs. They nurture them. They soothe them, because a baby does not know how to self-soothe. And any book that has told a parent that a baby should self-soothe is absolute bullshit. Run very far away from that information. So the more that we give this healthy attachment to a baby or to a child, the more independent they will be when they grow older, and the more able they will be to be in an interdependent relationship. So I'm going off on all tangents today, aren't I? So coming back to the understanding that if we're, sovereign beings in a relationship where, of course, there's going to be an element of dependency and but really that you understand that nobody is there to like make your needs fulfilled, but we can request them. It's not an expectation, it's not a demand, but we can say, this is what I need. Like, can you support me in that? Or would you be willing to? Or whatever it is. And sometimes it's really like, it might be really important. Like, actually, I really, really need this. But the thing is, it should always be a conversation. Gillian Turaki was saying that relationship is like constant negotiation, sometimes daily. And that doesn't have to be arduous, right? But it really is this, no two people are exactly alike. So no two needs are going to be exactly like, I can fulfill your need all the time and you can fulfill my needs all the time. Like, there are times where, yes, that's very easy. The need is like, yes, I can absolutely give that to you. Sometimes it's dependent on the moment, right? Sometimes it's like, I would like to give you that need, but I don't have the capacity in this moment. I'm overwhelmed, or I'm tired, or, I've got to finish this project. I have a deadline, whatever it is. I need to take care of the kids. But it should always be a conversation. And I think this is when we hold awareness and we come into conscious communication and really into quote unquote conscious partnership, is that there's the space to be able to express our fears, our insecurities, our worries, our whatever, the deeper aspects of ourselves that, sometimes people have shame about. And because fear and anxiety has such there's a lot of judgment around it, and there are not a lot of tools to really support us in how to hold that. I've always come from the perspective of when fear arises, you embrace it. You don't reject it. You don't neglect it. It's going to make it worse. It's just a part of you that's scared. There's a part of you that's anxious, and trying to toughen up and, transcend or whatever, that's actually just going to make that part feel worse, because what's happening is it's already feeling the fear and the anxiety, and then it's being ignored. And being ignored is far more painful than actually being disliked. Being ignored is really painful. So, if we're doing this to parts of ourselves, they will get louder, they will get bigger. And if they get louder and bigger and you still don't hear them, that's when it turns more into kind of depression, because then they all of a sudden kind of give up and go into the feeling of oppression and depression and repression. All the shishins. So where am I going with this? We want to be in partnership where we can support each other and be there for each other. But there has to be an element of self-responsibility. And I've talked about this before in the past. And that doesn't mean you have to do everything on your own, but it's getting out of this idea of you need to fix it for me. And that plays into, if I control you, then the relationship is going to be okay. Then I will feel safe. And again, that's an illusion, because one, that's just not possible. We can't do that. We can't control anybody else. And two, even when you get there, as I said earlier, you're going to feel, if the internal is still going, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm anxious, I'm anxious, I'm anxious. The external is just kind of like a little bit of a Band-Aid that for a moment you feel safe. For a moment, you feel like you can relax, but I guarantee you, your mind is going to create something else to be worried about and anxious about. So when we can come back, and it means facing our fears, it means facing our anxieties, it means facing whatever is driving all of these things. Is it a part of you that feels it's not good enough? Does it feel not worthy? Is it afraid of abandonment? Is it afraid of rejection? Is there any shame involved? Is there any pain that you feel like you can't look at and you're trying to ignore? All of this is an invitation to come back in and look at the deeper parts of you. Because if you can look at them and you can stay with them and you can show them that, you know what? I'm not going to abandon you. I'm not going to reject you. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to hurt you. But that by showing up again and again and again, and it's a practice, we have to kind of tell our inner child, like, I'm learning to show up as best as I can, as often as I can. Sometimes I'll forget because we're having to learn a new pattern. And the more you do that, and the more this part of you trusts through consistency, because you're consistently showing up without the judgment, then it goes, oh, okay, I can begin to trust you. And then when we begin to trust ourselves, then we can begin to relax. And when we feel more relaxed, we don't have to control so much. We're not coming so much from a place of fear. Or let's say the fear arises, but we're like, I'm here. I got you. You're not alone. I love you. Here, I'm going to take my fear by the hand. I'm going to take my anxiety by the hand, and I'm just going to be with them, stay with them, breathe with them, love them. Then this is the integration. We're integrating all of these parts that we might not like, that we might want to get rid of, that we might want to fix, that we might want to better ourselves from, And what we're doing is we're bringing them in, and we're embracing them, we're hugging them, and we're loving them, and they melt into us. Like, I've done visualizations with clients where once you go through the whole process, that part of you melts into your heart. So you really hold the seed of that in your heart, and just by that, it feels safe. It reminds me of the saying that we all know, that home is where the heart is. That's our sense of safety. Of course, the external helps, right? If you can feel safe within yourself, but if you're in a really unsafe relationship, no, that's not good. You need to get out of that relationship, right? It's not to say that if you have inner safety, that it doesn't matter what's happening on the outside. But it's just to say that if you start from a place of inner safety, you're going to have a lot more courage and resilience to move through the sometimes scary and difficult aspects of life. And love and relationship is going to bring up your stuff. It's going to trigger you. It's an amazing spiritual path and teaching if you want to take it that way. But it's going to have you look at yourself. But all of I feel like the work that I'm trying to do with people, and this is very much the path that I've walked myself because I really genuinely believe in walking my talk, is it's about finding our inner home. It's about building the best relationship with ourselves. Like that is the most important relationship ever. And if we can be honest with ourselves, if we can be authentic with ourselves, if we can be kind and compassionate, if we can listen, if we can show up with presence and give ourselves what we need, like as much as possible. This isn't to say that all of a sudden you should become a perfect human being. I don't believe in that either. It's just like, can we be there for ourselves just the way that we project like we would want a best friend or a partner or a parent or whatever? We've got to cultivate that relationship within ourselves. And I guarantee you that if you do that with yourself and you understand what it feels like to be safe within yourself because you are holding you, then you're going to be able to trust life more and be able to take that step by step. Life is just step by step. This whole projection into the future, like you can have a vision of it, that's great. But if your safety and your happiness is based on something in the future, you're constantly living outside of yourself. And the more you live outside of yourself and you're disconnected from your intuition and your inner knowing and you're listening to the cues of your body, and it's going to seem a lot scarier. It's going to perpetuate the fear and the anxiety. So that's why grounding exercises, breathing, doing physical stuff with your body, whether it's movement or weightlifting or some kind of sport, being in nature, singing, painting, gardening, anything that brings you into the present moment and into your body. And then maybe even into the expression of who you are. These are such grounding things for us to do. And when we do those things, fear, the kind of our nervous system that has been an overdrive can relax. And then there's just the need to control isn't there anymore because we're not as scared. We're not as afraid. It doesn't mean that life at times is sometimes you step into an unknown experience and you're like, oh God, that's making me nervous. That's a bit scary. But you're okay because you know that you're going to be there with and for yourself and you're going to show up with presence. And even as you feel the fear or the anxiety or the insecurity, you check in with yourself. You listen to how you're feeling. You ask yourself what you need. You give yourself what you need as best as you can, which is often just a feeling. And that's how you move through life. And that will give you a far greater sense of quote unquote control. Because simply, I wish there was another word for it. I would say that it just gives you the ability to, I'll have to come back to you with that. Like, what is the word? It's just that you know you're going to be okay. Like, you're just going to be okay. No matter what, you can ride the waves. No matter what gets thrown your way, you know you're going to be okay. And that's a question that I often ask my clients. Like, whatever they're going through, I'll say, can that be okay? And even if it's not okay, can that be okay? So this is what brings us like into a sense of presence and in the moment. Like right now, I'm okay because my internal world, I've been with it. I haven't neglected it. I'm not pushing it away. I'm not pretending. I'm not running from some internal part of myself that is really scared, that is just really needing my loving attention. If you can face all parts of yourself, most especially the parts that you deem ugly or shameful, your whole system will begin to relax. And because you trust yourself and you might, even begin to trust your intuition more, you will feel safer being with other people. Of course, you still have you have your inner guidance system that might be like, nope, that's not a good person to hang out with. Nope, that's not a good neighborhood to go into. But all of a sudden, it's like not everything is scary or everyone is scary or every situation or our perception changes, right? The moment our beliefs change, our perception changes. So that's why doing the belief work is also so important. Also, like, what is the narrative that you're telling yourself, about relationship, about love, about life, about anything. We are becoming like the sculptors of our life. And that is not to say that we're in control of everything. But presence and being with your entire human experience goes a really long way, and it really helps to feel. It's a feeling of safety. It's an embodiment, but it starts with a feeling. So just to repeat, if you are trying to control even yourself, actually, but especially if you're trying to control someone else, something else outside of you, if you're trying to control your own emotions, your own, and this could go into another conversation, but I'm not gonna go there because it's long enough as it is. Don't try to control, like white knuckle it. That means you are coming from a place of fear. True quote unquote control is just like, I'm okay with what's happening in this moment, meaning that no matter what arises, it's okay because I know how to show up for myself, take care of myself, give myself what I need. I know how to communicate what I need. I might need something from my partner in that moment. How do I communicate that in a way that it can be heard? Once we build all of these, skills and we collect these tools, again, life becomes more easeful. I'm not going to say it's easier all the time because sometimes life's a bitch and it's hard. But it becomes more easeful because we're not fighting ourselves. And we're not perpetuating our fear and anxiety and insecurity and worry and the story that we're not good enough and all of this, all of this stuff that we do. And that's okay. It's part of the human journey. It's part of the human arc. So whatever you see yourself doing in the external, can you take it as an invitation to turn around and ask yourself, what am I scared of? What do I need? How do I give myself that need? Can I feel safe within myself in this moment? So some food for thought. It's a big topic. I could go on and on and on, I'm sure, but it's really something that I invite you to ask yourself questions. Be curious, inquire, go within. It's going to be unique to you anyhow. So whatever I say, apply it to, yourself in a way that resonates and feels right. Okay. Loving you from afar. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.